Welcome back to our daily General Hospital discussion space. It is a beautiful Tuesday to dive deep into the latest drama unfolding in Port Charles. We always appreciate our loyal viewers joining us to unpack these intense storylines. Let us get right into the heart of today's analysis. I have been watching this soap opera for decades, and Ava Jerome never fails to leave me speechless. Sitting here in my favorite armchair with my coffee, reflecting on that gallery scene, I feel a complex mixture of awe and frustration. How does a woman stare down the barrel of a loaded gun and decide that insulting the desperate man holding it is the best course of action? It is moments like this that remind me why I am so deeply invested in her journey. She is fiercely independent and refuses to be a victim, but I cannot help but worry that this exact stubborn trait is going to get someone she deeply cares about killed. Do you ever find yourself yelling at your television screen, begging her to just be quiet? When Sidwell violently burst into her beautifully curated art gallery, waving that dangerous firearm around and looking for a hostage, my heart immediately jumped into my throat. I fully expected to see panic, or at least a tactical retreat to ensure her own safety, but instead, Ava did exactly what Ava does best. She stood her ground. My personal opinion is that her absolute refusal to cower is a deeply ingrained defense mechanism, built from years of dealing with dangerous men in Port Charles. She simply refuses to let any man see her sweat, but seeing her confront an armed criminal like Sidwell made me incredibly anxious. She completely ignored the immediate danger, and I honestly think she believes she is invincible. Then we have poor Ethan, who is right there in the direct line of fire. Sidwell had already forcefully disarmed him, taking his weapon and escalating the tension in the room to an almost unbearable level. I felt so much profound sympathy for Ethan in that specific moment. He is clearly trying his best to manage a highly volatile situation, and there is Ava, deliberately poking the armed bear. I think Ethan understands the criminal mind well enough to know exactly when to de-escalate and remain silent, but Ava just steamrolls right over his silent warnings. It makes me wonder how long Ethan can continue to play the selfless protector before the emotional toll becomes far too much for him to bear. What truly shocked me was when Ava boldly started throwing Sidwell's past horrific crimes directly in his face. She specifically and loudly called him out on whatever terrible things he did to Lucas and Marco. I sat there on my couch thinking, why on earth would she bring that sensitive information up right now while he is holding a gun? It was a breathtakingly reckless move on her part. My evaluation of this tense situation is that Ava instinctively uses her sharp tongue as a weapon whenever she feels cornered. She desperately wanted to throw Sidwell off his balance, but she completely miscalculated the harsh reality of the loaded weapon. I genuinely fear that her inability to filter her words is a tragic flaw that will have devastating consequences. And let us take a moment to talk about her utterly ridiculous choice of weaponry during this standoff. A decorative gallery letter opener against a high-powered firearm. It is almost comical if it were not so terrifyingly dangerous. I could not help but chuckle nervously to myself when she proudly brandished that little piece of metal as if it were a mighty sword. It perfectly encapsulates Ava's entire complex personality in one single image. She will fiercely fight a predator with a literal toothpick if it means protecting her fragile pride. But my brief admiration quickly turned to a deep dread. I knew for a fact that Sidwell was not playing games, and her relentless defiance was practically begging him to pull that trigger. Do you ladies agree that sometimes bravery crosses the line into pure foolishness? Another fascinating layer to this incredibly tense scene was Sidwell's sudden realization that Sonny would absolutely not negotiate to save Ava's life. When that harsh truth hung heavily in the air between them, I felt a profound sense of sadness and pity for her. Despite all her outward bravado and sharp insults, Ava is profoundly alone in this dangerous world. I strongly believe that knowing Sonny would not ride to her rescue actually fueled her fiery defiance even more than before. If no one is coming to save her, she feels she has to save herself, even if her chosen methods are terrifyingly misguided. It makes me predict that her already complicated relationship with Sonny is going to become even more fractured and bitter after this event. The exact moment Sidwell finally decided to fire his weapon, I physically flinched and gasped out loud. The fact that Ethan instinctively and without hesitation threw himself directly in front of that speeding bullet says absolutely everything you need to know about his noble character. I was overwhelmingly flooded with relief that Ava was not struck, but instantly devastated for poor Ethan. He bravely took a bullet for a woman who was actively making the situation worse. My personal opinion is that Ethan's heroic act was pure reflex, born out of a deep-seated need to protect those in danger, but it also starkly highlights the tragic cost of Ava's relentless stubbornness. She constantly writes massive checks with her mouth that other people's bodies are forced to cash. Seeing Ava's genuine, unfiltered panic immediately after Ethan was shot was an incredibly rare and powerful moment for our screens. She was absolutely terrified, frantically asking him why he would ever do such a foolish, selfless thing. For a hardened woman who rarely shows true vulnerability, this was a massive crack in her carefully constructed armor. I felt a surprisingly deep emotional connection to her in that fleeting instant. She is so accustomed to transactional relationships that a truly selfless act of physical sacrifice completely short-circuited her logical brain. It makes me wonder if this deeply traumatic event will finally be the catalyst that forces her to reevaluate how she handles dangerous situations. Will she ever learn to value the safety of others over her own pride? The immediate aftermath hidden away in the gallery storage room was classic, vintage General Hospital, perfectly blending intense drama with unexpected, laugh-out-loud humor. I found myself laughing heartily at the sheer absurdity of the entire situation. There is the glamorous Ava Jerome, frantically wrapping a makeshift pressure bandage around Ethan's injured rear end, all while complaining bitterly about her highly expensive gallery tarps getting ruined by his blood. Only Ava could possibly maintain her elite snobbery while actively treating a fresh gunshot wound. My thorough evaluation is that her incessant complaining about the tarps was actually her unique psychological way of coping with the sudden trauma and heavy guilt. She desperately needed to focus her mind on something trivial. When Ethan finally mustered the strength to tell her that insulting a desperate man holding a gun is not a very good idea, I literally cheered from my living room couch. Someone finally said it directly to her face without sugarcoating it. I was so incredibly glad he firmly called her out on her dangerously reckless behavior. Ethan's blunt words desperately needed to be said, but I am highly skeptical that Ava will actually take them to heart. She has survived this long in Port Charles by being utterly ruthless and entirely unyielding to anyone. My firm prediction is that she will eventually brush off his stern warning, convincing herself that her bold defiance is the only actual reason they are both still breathing today, completely ignoring the glaring fact that he took a painful bullet entirely because of her. As I look ahead to the coming weeks of episodes, I cannot help but feel a lingering, heavy sense of dread about what is to come. Sidwell is clearly still a massive, unpredictable threat, and the dangerous fallout from this violent gallery invasion is going to ripple through the entire town. I strongly believe Ava will attempt to mask her deep internal guilt over Ethan's painful injury with even more outward anger and aggressive defiance. She will likely go on the absolute warpath, relentlessly seeking her own brand of revenge against Sidwell. But I truly hope she takes a quiet, private moment to reflect on what Ethan selflessly did for her. She needs to understand that her greatest strength is simultaneously her most dangerous weakness. Do you ladies think she is truly capable of that kind of deep self-reflection? The evolving, complex dynamic between Ethan and Ava is something I am suddenly very eager and excited to explore further as this storyline progresses. There is a deeply fascinating contrast between his quiet, observant, protective nature and her loud, aggressive, defensive posturing. I truly think Ethan sees right through her tough, impenetrable exterior, which is exactly why he did not hesitate for a single second to take that bullet for her. He knows deep down that she is a person worth saving, even when she is being incredibly foolish. My bold prediction is that this intense, shared trauma will either bond them tightly together in a beautiful way or push them completely apart, as Ava might aggressively push him away just to avoid feeling indebted. What do you all think about this unexpected pairing?